And joining me fresh off that stage from the congressional panel is United States Senator Katie Britt. Senator, thanks for coming by.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. It's always good to be with you.
Absolutely. Well, we're here at the BCA conference. Really interesting presentations today about polling, economic polling. I was struck by this data that showed voters really want their elected officials to focus on economic issues, pocketbook issues, more so than social issues, which is interesting because sometimes when we're on social media, that's all we hear about is the divisive things. We're fighting with each other. As an elected official, what did you take away from seeing that data?
Well, I think obviously the more people learn about the One Big Beautiful Bill, the more they're going to realize that we're being responsive to that very thing, whether it's no tax on tips or no tax on overtime or even deductions for our seniors that are living on a fixed income. There are a lot of things in the Big Beautiful Bill that are going to address hardworking Americans being able to keep more of their hard-earned money. One of the things I was most proud of that we did in that bill, and I led the effort for, was actually updating the child care tax credits. So you hear a lot, Todd, about the child tax credit, which I'm proud that we made permanent and expanded by $200, but the work that I did specifically on this bill were updating tax codes that haven't been updated in almost 4 decades and some time. So we did both the CDCTC and the DCAP, one of which had not been updated since 1986. So believe me, the cost of child care has gone up since Reagan was in office. The other had not been updated since 2001. Additionally, we put another component in there of 45F. It hasn't been updated since 2001. What that does is allow businesses, both large and small, to actually be a part of the solution. Now, all of that to say is what we're trying to do is allow hardworking parents to keep more of their money, to make those decisions about what's best for their child, and then actually address this affordability and accessibility of childcare, which I hear from the top to the bottom of our state. Whether I am talking with our largest manufacturer, Todd, or our smallest business on Main Street, they say workforce and making sure that they can retain that quality workforce, not losing them to childcare issues, which we have found that 59% of people who have who are stay-at-home parents actually want to re-enter the workforce, but that affordability or accessibility of childcare is a problem. So this is one of those things that we've heard people on both sides of the aisle talk about for years, and I think it's really instructive that the Republican Party has become the big tent party, the party of parents, the party of hardworking Americans. We heard Americans on November 5th because if you look at this reconciliation bill, Democrats had 2 bites at the apple under the Joe Biden administration. They never tackled the affordability or accessibility of child care. And the fact that we were able to update those, our very first run, so to speak, out of the gate is something I'm really proud of. I hope more people learn about them so they actually take advantage of them. And then we're going to continue to carry that mantle. I'm proud to carry it and continue to look for ways to alleviate that for hardworking people across the country.
Well, also on the economic front is the issue of tariffs, right? The president's tariff policies. I mean, I don't know, we're all trying to figure it out, but a lot of concerns about that because, these tariffs a lot of times get passed on. Import taxes essentially get passed on to the consumer. What should we think about tariff policy? I mean, do you support these tariff policies?
Yeah, so what we're seeing, obviously, is for years, America being taken advantage of on the world stage. And what President Trump has said is that we want to level the playing field. He believes that if you put America on a level playing field, that we're going to win every single time, and I do as well. When we're working to figure out how we onshore more jobs for Americans, that is critically important. Look, if we took nothing away from the pandemic in 2020, it was that we should onshore our critical supply chain, that we want to make sure that we don't just lead when it comes to innovation, but we actually lead when it comes to building as well. It's one thing to create these things, but then if we are dependent on our adversaries in some spaces to be able to actually achieve them, we're not putting America in the best place possible for success. And driving up American wages is also critically important. So what we've done is obviously he has been given the flexibility and the time to create those spaces. On many fronts, he has had just historic wins for the American people. It'll take some time for us to be able to let those cement, for the building to come back, and that won't happen overnight, but the commitments we've gotten from so many companies, whether it is Apple or some of our auto manufacturers, are going to be significant in creating the American dream for hardworking Americans. Now, we're not done yet. So to your point, there are some more outstanding trade deals that need to come together, but I have faith that President Trump will actually achieve that, whether it's with Mexico or Canada, or some of our other countries that we deal with quite frequently across the board. I believe when you see the success that he's created thus far, we'll continue to have that moving forward.
Speaking of the president, you've had to interact quite a bit with the administration on funding, right? I'm going back to the Greyhound situation, the Montgomery. You talked about that on stage just a moment ago. The Tuskegee situation. You had the education funding that was frozen, and you worked to get it unfrozen. NIH, all these things. I describe it almost as whack-a-mole. You're having to play whack-a-mole to get all this funding figured out and released for Alabama, which I understand. It takes a lot of work, and kudos to you. But should it ever have to happen? Should you have to be playing this game of whack-a-mole with the administration, considering this is funding that Congress has already appropriated? And what's that been like? What is your process? Who do you call?
Right. Well, I think it is my job to know and understand the needs of our state, to understand our strengths, to know our history, to ensure that it is preserved and celebrated, and work diligently to achieve that. So making sure that when things do come up, that I am well versed on the issue, and then figure out who the best point person is to call to either unlock that funding or to make sure that things are set in the right direction. Whether it was, obviously Pete Hegseth stepped in immediately when it came to the Tuskegee Airmen situation, and was so proud of his leadership in ensuring that they cemented their rightful place in the history, not just of our state, but our nation and the world. Same thing with making calls about whether it's the Montgomery bus stop or others. In particular, when I looked at the education money, I was proud to join 9 of my other colleagues to say, hey, this matters, and let's make sure that the money that we appropriated is properly used. And then additionally, the NIH. So not only did I lead the letter and make sure that we are working diligently, and we've been working on this for quite some time. We've gotten actually Secretary Kennedy a number of times in the space, whether it's being hearings or other things, talking about the great work that's done in Alabama, the life-saving and life-changing research that we do here across our state. That's because we've been front and center, both in my conversations with him and making sure we're providing data to decision makers. So I led that letter when it came to NIH possible pocket rescissions with, I think there were 14 of us on that letter. And then when news media kind of broke that may not be the case and they may actually be rescinded, made sure I actually called the president myself. It was a great conversation with President Trump. He believes in finding cures. He believes in saving lives, and he believes in America leading the way. So that was a quick and easy conversation, ensuring that we have the proper funding to continue that research, not just here in our state, but across the country. So I think that's the role that I signed up for, right, Todd? I mean, I'm supposed to know Alabama best, and I'm supposed to be willing to step up when it's needed, and that's what I'm doing time and time again. And look forward, though, to the appropriations process to continuing to move forward right now. This is the problem in what we had under Chuck Schumer, which was not putting any of the marked up appropriations bills on the floor, wanting to hoard that power and hope to get an omnibus, only to ultimately get a CR in the end. If we do appropriations bills, there's more skin in the game. People have more opportunity to direct that funds where it needs to go, and then there's more buy-in and progress moving forward. You saw us do a rescission bill for the very first time in over 30 years because we lost the trust of the American people. Money that had allocated to certain things was used far outside the mission of which it was intended, and the American taxpayer deserves better. So we're approaching this from a number of different ways, but I am proud to be a voice for the great things that happen in Alabama, and make sure that those are elevated, sometimes to the very highest level, so that we can make sure that we achieve results.
It's interesting you bring that up, the appropriations process, because I think the last time we talked on Capitol, or actually just after you got elected, we talked about Article 1 and Congress reasserting its Article 1 authority, because under the prior administration you had a lot of these arguments. But I'll have to say, a lot of times it just seems like Congress is ceding its authority to President Trump. There's no room for debate, no room for disagreement or anything. So how do you square that? Is it going to be an actual congressionally led, Article 1 led, appropriations process, or is it just going to be whatever the White House wants?
So I would have to respectfully disagree on that. I think probably a lot of what you're seeing is what the media ultimately wants you to see. We've had an unprecedented level of obstruction, both when Chuck Schumer was the leader of the Senate, when the Democratic Party was in control, not putting things like the appropriations bills on the floor, not moving things that had true bipartisan support forward, and yet we've seen that became the crux of our leadership election when we were looking to find a new Republican leader. Number one question on everyone's mind is, are you going to give power back to individual senators? Are you going to allow us to actually move bills through the process? And are you going to actually put the appropriations bills on the floor so we have an opportunity to speak for our constituents directly into how we're spending these dollars? Leader Thune has done a remarkable job, but yet again in the face of unprecedented obstruction. So if you're looking at what we've been able to achieve this Congress so far, we've sent more than 12 bills both through the House and Senate and to President Trump's desk. I was proud to have the very first bill, which was the Lake and Riley Act, where we, for the first time, actually dealt with immigration enforcement in over 30 years. Also, I've gotten Lulu's Law through the Senate. We look forward to getting that one through the House. But we've also gotten the Halt Fentanyl Act. We've gotten the Take It Down Act. We've gotten a number of important pieces of legislation to the president's desk. But there are many pieces of legislation, Todd, that are waiting to get floor time. We have over 120 bipartisan pieces of legislation that have been marked up in committee that are waiting for their moment on the floor. Now, one of those pieces of legislation is the Road to Housing Act. We know that housing has become unaffordable for Americans. Going back to your very first point about this is what people care about. They want economic security. They want a pathway to the American dream. I would argue to say most people's American dream, a component of that is being able to own their own home. Used to, people would own their own home at about 28 years old on average. Now it's about 38, 39 before you can buy your first home. We've got to make sure this becomes in reach. When you look at homelessness, there's pieces of this legislation that we want to even improve on and make sure that homelessness is addressed. It rose exponentially in 2023, even here in the state of Alabama. Some statistics say up to 40%. There's 11,000 children in the state that say that they consider themselves homeless. So I have a bill with Angela Also Brooks to actually address that. And so, Todd, all of these different components and a portion of the Road to Housing Act that I have with Senator Jack Reed in there is making sure that we take programs that were built to help people get on their feet and create a glide path so they can actually do that. So we've got a lot of good things, right, that'll address issues that people are having and make the American dream more attainable, will make the country more prosperous, but they have to be able to see the floor. And right now what we're seeing is yet again unleveled precedent undue levels of obstruction from Chuck Schumer. And I just want to give you a little bit of a window into that. We have voted twice more than the House of Representatives have, and you have worked in Congress. That is unheard of. Some people say that we've been in session, I don't have the exact number, but over 30 days more than they have. We have been working around the clock, passing this legislation, One Big Beautiful Bill, the legislations I mentioned, the rescissions about. We've actually passed appropriations bills on the floor all before August. But the nomination process has become so ridiculous when it comes to throwing up every roadblock possible is what Chuck Schumer is doing to prevent President Trump from getting his people in place. And I think your viewers need to take a look at this, and I encourage you to do this. If you go back to the exact same time, okay, rewind to Clinton, I think he had passed at this same point in time before we left for the state work period in August, 217 nominees by voice vote. Then you go to George W. Bush, 192 nominees by voice vote. Then you can go to Obama, 209 nominees that passed by voice vote. Then go to President Trump's first term, 4. Then go to President Biden's term, 44. And now go to President Trump's second term, 0. So when you are jumping through these procedural hurdles, you are inhibiting our ability to actually move things through the Senate in a multitude of ways. So I would say we are absolutely asserting our authority in a number of ways, and we'll continue to find ways to do better and be better in that for sure. But we've got to make sure that the obstruction stops so that we can get to work for the American people. And I certainly am going to work to be a part of that. Absolutely.
We'll leave it there. I know it's been a long slog. I've never seen a stretch of like this in the Senate.
Honest to gosh, Todd, it's unbelievable. And you think about the number of votes we've had overnight, like 30 hours on, or 27 hours on the floor and 14 hours and this and that. I mean, we understand the mission. We know that this is a moment in time, and we have to do everything in our power to, you know, to cement this and to move the nation forward. But it is certainly something. It's rare that you see the Senate take more votes than the House, and at such a significant level.
We've also seen you wearing your comfortable shoes.
That's right. That's right. Listen, I gotta be ready. I gotta be ready to get after it at any point in time.
Yeah, look, I really appreciate you coming on and explaining some of these things, the questions we have about what's going on in Washington. And yeah, thanks for your time here at the BCA conference.
Thank you. It's an honor to represent Alabama, and I promise I'm giving it everything I've got every day.
We'll be right back.